Hello, everyone. This is Jeffrey Tefertiller back with another Service Management Leadership Podcast. Today, I have an exciting guest for you. I say exciting, I'm pumping you up. Waseem Ahmed. Waseem is a VP in an operations type of role for a bank, a big bank. And he and I interact on LinkedIn all the time. And we're service management people. We think like that. So with all that ado, Waseem, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So Waseem, I very much appreciate you taking the time to review and offer feedback on my book, the ITIL 4, The New Frontier, only because I get trapped in my own thoughts. And we all do. We all don't realize that our blind spots. And so I appreciate your feedback, give me a different perspective. And so thank you. So today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I actually enjoy reading the book. Always good to have content from you. Love reading it and love interacting with you on the LinkedIn. So thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you. And so Waseem and I come from very different backgrounds, but what's really interesting is we kind of see the world, the service management world, from the same point of view. At least I'm projecting that onto you, Waseem. But
well, I think ITSM professionals, I guess, from that perspective, I think they have got a different lens, right? So we think from a different perspective where others are not, and it's kind of a, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. So it's kind of a, that kind of a deal. So I agree.
So Waseem, I have a loaded question for you coming out of that you may or may not have been asked before. Okay. Sure. How do you explain what you do from a service management point of view? Somebody that doesn't even know how to spell IT.
That's a very good question, actually, very interesting. So yeah, I think to somebody who doesn't really know about IT and anything, to explain it to them what a service management is, I think we kind of probably look at it from a service perspective, maybe something like, which is, not having ITSM, but just has an SM, which is service management, right? So it's, any kind of service, we're providing in any business, whatever we do, just kind of probably have to look from that perspective. How to deliver a service, when you have a car shop or maybe, ice cream parlor or something like that. So it's a service reporting to the customers, client, and user. So same thing, we should take the same model to the IT. So basically that becomes IT service. So.
And that was a setup. So today's conversation, we're going to have three topics. And we're going to lead with CMDB. And so CMDB is a way, I think of it as foundational to any service management organization, because all your CIs are there. It defines the scope of your service management organization and all of that sort of view. Is that the way you see it, or do you see it a different way?
I see the same way. I think, it's kind of a service, CMDB is a central, point. Of course, that's where, where our services are defined and everything, and measure for that matter too. So I totally see this the same way. Absolutely. Yep.
Especially as I'm going to pile on if I may.
Yeah,
as
sure.
We go from configuration items and assets that are pure IT. And
Yep.
Here, if it hasn't in every organization, it's going to be soon, going to expand outside of that. So in the banking world, you have non-traditional IT configuration items that will be in a CMDB. Yep. And I think hospitals have technology everywhere. You think every organization is soon going to be a technology organization. Yep. And so another question for you is that the CMDB is a big role there. First of all, do you see it that way? And second of all, how do you think people can do that effectively?
So yeah, I definitely do it the same way, see the same way. So, and in my experience, I've seen that, companies or organizations, they're launching on that digital transformation, right? More specifically, from pandemic perspective, since that pandemic started, a lot of companies are, people are working, remote, and then they're not physically there in the office or for whatever reason. From pandemic perspective, right? So they're trying to build that, digital transformation, taking the the same model and then going towards the digital space. So in that, CMDB plays a very important role. If I'm not mistaken, I was reading a study the other day. I believe that from Harvard Business perspective, Harvard Business Review, they were saying that 23 to 25% of the executive agree that they lack the processes and people side of that view. So CMDB comes into the same picture, right? I mean, people and process is very important. So I think that people, process, technology, all three of those are extremely important from that perspective.
So another piling on question. So last week I put out a poll on LinkedIn about people thinking, what's the percentage of compliance if you're a ServiceNow person? All right, just I know that you know this, Waseem, but for those listening, in ServiceNow, completeness means if you have an Excel spreadsheet or all the boxes filled in. Compliance means, are they right? And are they right is what we care about. And other tools call it different, but roughly 2/3 of the people were under 80%. And I think the ones that were in the 90 to 100%, I don't know how accurate that is. That was a high number, but
yeah,
I just haven't found very many people that do the CMDB well, and their business stakeholders are like, yes, I have confidence in that data.
Right. I totally agree. I totally agree with that. I mean, in my experience, honestly, the perception is totally different than reality, right? You find out of executives saying, "Oh yeah, they've got everything, the way it's supposed to, from compliance perspective, from otherwise, right?" But the reality is totally different. I mean, I've seen companies, they don't even have federated database CMDB. They're only using one CMDB. They think this is the whole thing. I mean, and that's not even complete. So so it's yeah. I mean, I don't know that poll. I actually saw it, so I was kind of wondering about it. Those small percentage they were saying 90% above. I questioned that. I was like, well, is that really true or not? So I agree with you on that.
It's hard. I mean, I don't want to pick on those people. It's hard to have a 90% CMDB because what happens is people at first they bite off, to use a Midwestern US term, bite off too much at the beginning, and they, whether it's CI classes, which would be scope, or attributes, which is also scope. And then the more you have, it costs more, and the more difficult it is to keep up. And you mentioned people and process. The process and governance and improvement aspect of the CMDB is tough. And I don't think it gets enough love from the way you pointed out earlier.
It's really hard. I mean, CMDB is very misunderstood at a different level. I mean, every organization or IT shop you go to, they've got a different understanding of CMDB. I believe that one of the organizations I worked for, or I consulted earlier before coming to City, that's the place I'm working right now. So that organization at that time, a few years back, I was back like maybe 10, 15 years ago, they had a pretty good team. And I would say that their even directors were actually actual practice. Every director I go to, and I was consulting, they actually were looking for improving their configuration management and asset management program within their organization at that time. And yeah, I mean, I was amazed like how very well versed they were in ITIL and ITSM. Because like I mentioned, that even their directors were ITIL practitioners. Right? Every director you go to, you usually don't find that it's not common. It's not really common that you're going to find at that level people very versed in ITIL, ITSM framework, really actually knowing what they're doing. So it's very rare, very, very rare. That was the one organization I found that they knew what they were doing. So it's not really easy. It's very hard. I see in my experience, companies struggle for years and years and years implementing CMDB. They might have something, but it's not something the way it's supposed to.
Well, I think one of the problems is, and you touched on this earlier, is it's too much tool centric. And so I had a role at KPMG for their internal where I had change and config and knowledge, all that stuff, release. And when I took over, it was on try number 6 of getting the CMDB right.
Wow.
And it had never been above 59%. And the last time was because they turned on discovery. And it, when you have a big enterprise and you turn on discovery and just let it happen,
Yeah.
it finds everything and you can't make sense of it. And that was people who were practitioners, knew what they were supposed to be doing, but they didn't understand the process part of it. And, it's just hard. I don't want to minimize anyone. It's hard. And you have to have people that know what they're doing. Does that seem fair?
That is 100% fair. It's a challenge. And some organizations think that, hey, if we just have a tool, it's going to solve everything. It's like a magic wand, but it's not. It's hard to tell them, no, it's not a magic wand. You're not just going to bring in the tool and expect everything to work flawlessly. That's not going to work like that. So it's very hard. And then, like I said, it's more perception than reality, right? People think that this is how it's going to be, but in reality, it's totally different.
So let's combine those two thoughts. All right. So first we talked about the CIs expanding across the enterprise outside of IT. And so that's the direction we want to go. But behind that, we're like, well, most CMDBs are not being successful. And now they're being asked to do more, which is a challenge, yet an opportunity to, get the house in order and show value.
Right, exactly. I mean, I think that, I mentioned earlier that, most of the organization, they don't, they're not able to produce value out of CMDB because of, I guess there are certain challenges, right? I guess one of the challenges is to have, a federated federated CMDB. That I have rarely seen exist in any IT shop or organization, be it small, medium, large, and they have desperate systems basically. Somewhere I've seen that they have business have their own CMDB, and then IT have their own CMDB. They don't talk to each other somehow or some way, and they're maintaining their own, and they're maintaining their own. They don't talk to each other. So I think culture is another challenge where they don't really understand from what and how and where. And I think another challenge would be discovery, like you mentioned earlier, auto discovery and manual discovery, and there's not a set frequency where things happen. It's kind of a the process is not there, or not an understanding of process, and then so those challenges, culture and discovery, how to do it, like you mentioned earlier, they do discovery, and most of the time it's something automatic, and they don't really combine both of them, automatic, manual, and then they don't probably verify that and stuff like that. So those are some challenges I think that they're there at this time, where basically it doesn't provide any value at that, when we do it this way. So
oh yes, and to pile on that, I keep adding to, because you're offering great commentary, is that the network team may keep their stuff in Cisco Works, and they're like, I'm not keeping up in the CMDB as well. Or you also look at discovery. Is it meeting what the stakeholders, when we put in the CMDB, do we say what data do we need back out of it and build it around there? Do we throw in the CMDB because it's a tool and we know how to implement tools, and without any purpose? And then you see these, like what was it last month, where Shell Oil had to re-implement their whole ServiceNow instance, because it wasn't done. That happens way too frequently because people put things in without purpose. And the tool, I'm not picking on anyone specifically, but the tool implementer is incentivized to implement the tool, not make sure it's usable for the client.
Absolutely, I totally agree on that one. One of the things, when I was mentioning challenges earlier, it also comes into mind that I think organizational companies probably think that they need to have just one CMDB and then put everything in there, be it be financial, be it be HR and anything like that. It's kind of a challenge to understand for some companies that, not everything has to be maintained within CMDB, not everything has to be a CI. And then also they can have a separate system, which is basically a financial or HR or whatever, but they can always mirror into that federated CMDB, right? So I think that's a major challenge, that you've got different, like, multiple CMDBs out there, and not really good configuration management process around it, or asset management process around it, for that matter. So I think those are pretty good challenges that kind of I see that they block those value for CMDB.
Oh, yes. And it's one of those that it's buried so deep in IT, the business stakeholder, it's almost binary to them. They either think I have confidence in it, or there's no way I have confidence in it.
Right.
There's really nothing in between. So moving on to our second topic, a few days, weeks ago, you mentioned in a LinkedIn post about the watermelon effect.
Yes.
And I've written about it. It's in the book, Watermelon Metrics, and it's something I've used for a while, because I think we all, especially because I live in the South in the US, and so do you, we all know what a watermelon is, right?
Right.
So
Right.
why don't you explain to us, please, the watermelon effect, how it impacts like our metrics and some of our IT centric KPIs, CSFs, things of that nature.
Yeah, absolutely. So watermelon, just like you described, right? I mean, it's red, from the inside, but green from the outside and red from the inside, right? So on the outwardly, it looks that if you have metrics and, it looks like that, oh, everything is good. Our services are good. We have no issues. And, when we're reporting those metrics, and it was like, oh, yep, everything is good, up and running. We're good. But when you dig down into it, you find that no, it's not really green. It's red, because for whatever reason, the way they're measuring the services. So I give you an example for incident management, right? I mean, or change for that matter. But let's talk about incident first, right? And if you're reporting I would say availability or service availability for that matter, to see how our services are doing, we probably sometime will look at operational metrics, but not actually CSM and KPIs for that matter, right? So when we look at operational metrics, it was like, oh, we have like maybe 50 last month, and we have 10 this month, or maybe now we're looking at maybe 5 next month, from predictive analysis or whatever. So we're only looking at operational metrics, and on the outwardly, everything is good. Our volume for incidents is going down, so we're green, right? So, but in actuality, when you look at it, we've got our root causes and our repeat incidents, and for that matter, reoccurrences for that matter are not really the same. Are we, do our CSFs are not the same, our KPIs are not the same, but our operational metrics are green, right? So that's what I think, that's what the watermelon effect is.
I had one, I'm not going to mention which former employer, but the person who's a director, one of my peers over incident and problem, not every, but a lot of the P1s that came in, he manually moved them down to P2s, P3s. And so it showed oh man, his response and resolution time's great. But his business customer was unhappy because their stuff is down. And it's one of those that the watermelon effect is one that it's all from the customer's point of view. This is my perspective. It's all from the customer's point of view. You mentioned incident.
Yeah.
If another one I saw this same person do is reopen the same incident, so we wouldn't have 2 incidents on the same thing after the problem went through, right? And so it's one of those that when we cut into it, we have to think from the business consumer point of view, would they be happy with this? And if not, there's no way it's green.
Right, exactly. If your customers are unhappy, they are feeling it, and they're not really, saying that, what we're delivering, what we promised to them, and then it's not been delivered, of course, then but your metrics or your operational metrics for that matter say otherwise, then of course there is something wrong there, right? And I mentioned the same change perspective, right? Some change management, right? I mean, you've got change metrics, right? And then in some places they would use change process successfulness or how the change process is doing. But in other words, so you got a change failure. Basically, if the change did not reach its intended purpose, it's a fail, right? But if you look at it from change process perspective, well, people follow the change process and they said, well, we followed it, so we're good. It doesn't matter if we had a service interruption or not, but and so that's another watermelon effect right there, watermelon metric there, which basically looks pretty green from outward because people follow the change process, but in actuality, it did cause an interruption in a service. So that's actually red, it's not green. So that's another example of that, of course.
And it's from the business point of view, right? The business would look at it and say, there's no way that thing's green, right? There's no way.
Exactly.
And so I think the world of IT and IT service management is littered with these, and we could go on and on about it. Yep. But why do you think there's so many? I have my own views, but I want to give you a chance to answer. Why are there so many watermelon effect metrics?
I think I honestly think that I've worked with a lot of organizations and from consulting side, ITSM consulting, and also being an employee as well, different companies, right? I see a common theme there, or a trend for that matter, if you want to call it. I think it's lack of understanding of IT always look inwardly. They don't look at service as a service, right? I mean, it's always technology. How are we doing, and are we basically from technology perspective, but it's not that how we're providing our services, are our customers happy? It's two different views, right? And I think we'll probably have a conversation this morning as well on LinkedIn. We're talking about that, service value, right? To create that service value for the business. Most of the time we don't look at it from IT perspective. Are we providing value to our customers for that matter, or our clients for that matter, right? And I think it's just a view. I think that needs to be changed. But this has been going on for a long time. It's not just now, though. Technology has been like that. For IT folks have been like that. It's just purely technical. They don't tend to understand the business side of it. So I think that's one of the reasons. It happens. Those are one of the reasons, I would say.
I want to add to it. I want to get your perspective. I think we're measuring the wrong things at times. And let me give you an example.
Yes.
I think that having volume metrics like the number of changes, it doesn't matter. One of the metrics that I started using through my career was a percentage of emergency changes to normal changes. I wanted to have some kind of urgency index, so I knew, is there something underlying that's causing us to have more urgency than we really should? Right. I think that we rely on volume metrics, which can easily be watermelons.
Right, exactly. And also, I mean, having just volume and operational, for that matter, metrics it's not simple enough. I mean, it's not enough to gauge, whether you have a good service, delivery or not. I mean, because, I think critical success factors and, key performance indicators are the two key areas I've seen a lot of companies miss out. They only focus on volume, right? Are we going up or down? And that's basically it, but that doesn't give you a true picture. I mean, it's absolutely not the right picture, what we need to improve upon, to make a decision upon, for that matter, right? I mean, what do we need to change? So we can't have just operational metrics and then say, oh, everything is good.
So one of the ones I've talked about a few times, especially when I've had software asset people on, is this is an example that it just hit me square in the face. So I was looking in the SAM tool, I won't mention which, and it showed a certain Adobe title as green because it had, and I was like, that's fine, I'll click on it, we'll dig down. So we had 13 and we were using 0. That's not green. Yes, it is from a compliance point of view, but
Right.
there's an efficiency aspect. So when I cut into it, there's an efficiency aspect that was not being met. And I think it's the way we look at it, right? It's
Yeah.
the problem. What problem is it we're trying to solve? Kind of back to that CMDB conversation.
Exactly.
So how do you think leaders can get the mindset for resolving these watermelon effects, helping to cut into them, even if it's figuratively, and understand that there's something underlying here?
I think culture has to do a lot of it, and then again, also more education, more understanding of what ITSM, it really is, right? I mean, it's at the end of the day providing value to our customers or clients, right? I mean, so understanding it, how to do that, and like I gave you an example before, only one company I have worked for, consulted for, actually, I was really impressed with them that even at their director level, they did understand what truly ITSM, ITIL, meant, and what it means, and then driving from that, I think everybody knows that, all ITIL practitioners and everybody knows that this is a top-down approach. It's not a bottom-up. So top-down, I think executives and executive management really need to understand what it means to have deployed IT service management at a level where they can understand what service delivery they're looking at, what value they're providing, and I think it's just need to replicate throughout the organizations.
Yes, and I'm right there with you. And I think a lot of times we default to the metrics that are in the tool, and we think that's best practice. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, and we just default to that. So on that note, what are some of the best metrics that you've implemented, that you've seen, that you like, that kind of, I don't want to say help get rid of the watermelon effect, but help leaders understand the services from their business stakeholders' point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my best metrics, I'll look at it from, I keep on going back to incident, problem, and change, and that's what I've kind of worked, around in IT operations area. So, I honestly think that operational metrics, just like, saying that we're going up and down, is not really enough. What I've seen and in my experience, and I think that what are the best metrics I work with are those critical success factors, the one that at the end of the day make a difference. Not just that, okay, how many MIMs major incident management, how many MIMs we had or major incidents we had, but also looking at that, okay, well, what about the mean time to restore, mean time between failures, mean time between success, service up and down, service availability. What are our critical success factors we're measuring? So those, service availability, time between failures, and all those are the one I've experienced. Change success rate, are we providing, is the change meeting the intended purpose? Basically from that perspective. Also from governance and risk and compliance perspective as well, right? I mean, not just up and down, but hey, are we meeting our governance and risk, or not? So those are the I would say, measuring your critical success factors as opposed to operational metrics are the best metrics I've been around.
Yes, and I like when you're talking about major incident management. I got to confess something. I have in recent times gone back to the ITIL V3 books, the service operations, service transition book, and looked at those for ideas on how to push forward, because a lot of those are better and deeper thought process metrics than what's in the tool.
Right.
One such metric that's not in there that I really like, and it's not in, you don't see it in books, but in it, both for change and incidents, especially major incidents, is the cost of an outage. Because if we measure uptime, which is awesome, it depends on what industry you're in. You're in the banking world. An incident, two incidents that are alike in everything else other than day of the week and time of the day are not the same. So one that hits a bank at midnight on Sunday is, even in our 24-hour cycle that's picking up and going 24/7, that's totally different than Monday at 10 a.m.
Right.
Monday at 10 a.m., a major incident is bad news. And so I want to understand cost of the outage, right? Because if I'm a leader and my business people are yelling at me, this is the way I can quantify to either get more resources, because hey, this is costing us a bunch more to be down, let's get more resources, or to maybe alter how we do changes, alter some of our other behaviors.
Right. Exactly. I mean, they are not two major incidents are not the same, right? And unless, like I was going to say that, when you mentioned it's unless it's a day before Thanksgiving, right? I mean, people are hitting the at all nighter, I mean, and then Cyber Monday or something like that, right? They're just going they're going crazy. So yeah, those outages, but of course, those are the time frame isolated during that time, right? On a normal business, and Sunday 12 o'clock or whatever, 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, it's not the same thing as Monday 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock for that matter, when your branch is open or something like that, right? If it's a financial industry for that matter. So yeah, I agree on that.
And so I'm always baffled, and I mean that, like, sit there with that dad face on, shaking my head, baffled by some of the organizations I've worked for, that they did not see the change implementation timing from their business stakeholders' point of view. They did it for their own convenience point of view, not from the stakeholder point of view of, let's look at this from a risk aspect.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I'm totally with you with that, right? I mean, that happens so quite often, right? I mean, doesn't matter the industry, I mean, but it does happen so quite often. I mean, like I was saying earlier too, right? I mean, we touched base on that earlier too, that, it's all about IT, right? I mean, providing value. So we'll just look at, ourselves, what is convenient to us, not, to the customer. It's kind of amazing that, it happens, right? I mean, I don't understand, it's to your point, I'm baffled with that too. Why we're going to do that? It's the same thing, I was saying earlier that, our salespeople, they would go to the businesses and and then promise something what IT cannot deliver, right? I mean, we say 99.999 availability, and then we get it signed and all that stuff, where we don't even know what our IT capability and capacity and demand for that matter is. So it's kind of a give and take, and then we end up losing so much money because we cause an service interruption, because salespeople and then IT folks are not in sync,
and they're incentivized differently, right?
Exactly.
I have this, the older I get, that I have this core belief that we all do what we're incentivized to do. Yes. My kids are incentivized to do one thing, and if they don't do what I ask, it's because they feel like they're incentivized to do something else, right? I mean, I just think we're all capitalists down in our heart. We do what we're incentivized to do.
Absolutely. So, and hence the metrics too, right? So
yeah. Oh yeah. And so on our last question, before we move on to the next and last topic, how can someone improve the way they measure compliance and health and performance? Because those to me are the three big categories. How can they do that better?
So, we talk ITIL and ITSM and, in a broader, and of course, there are some other frameworks out there. For example, COVID, right? I mean, I honestly think that, if we go by risk and compliance, I mean, I think that's the better way to look at it, right? I think that's how we can manage those risks and compliance, making sure that, we've got, and then of course, companies get audited as well, right? And then so different people use different, someone is using SOX, someone using COVID and stuff like that. So I think that using those frameworks helps a lot. And I think just not just using it, I think that understanding of those frameworks is another thing, right? I mean, same thing like ITIL, ITSM, right? we have different people implementing in a different pace, different, backgrounds, different, speed and stuff like that, and then different understanding for that matter, right? And same thing with, governance, risk, and compliance as well. I think that it's a matter of understanding how to do that, how to deploy it. But we've got those frameworks out there, right? I mean, I hardly see people using them, right? I mean, we got Agile, we got Six Sigma, we got DevOps, we got SRE, we've got COVID, and I think it's at the end of the day, it matters how you take everything, right, and then how you deploy it, and then at the end of the day, how you provide the value. So I honestly think that in my experience, I think it's just a matter of somebody coming in and taking charge and saying, okay, well, this is how we're going to do things. And because I think that a lot of times executives are not aware of all that which goes along, because will tell you what to do. It doesn't tell you how to do it.
Right.
It's up to you how to do that and how to best utilize all those frameworks that are out there. So yeah, I mean, so it's more of a kind of an architecture, right? I mean, like you have a IT technology system architecture, application architecture, the same way we've got the service management architecture, right? And you kind of pretty much need somebody who is an architect of IT service management is gonna take the reins on.
Oh yes, and I'm gonna pile on just a little bit there. Those metrics. So compliance is huge for almost every leader, and performance, yes, especially because performance is usually in the context of an external provider,
right?
And health is more internal. But it's still, what does the business customer need from those three? If you're at a bank, you have certain groups that need a compliance aspect for SOX or SOC or whatever. Yep. And so you want to measure what's important from that aspect. Does that sound fair?
Yes, absolutely. It does sound fair, and I gotta. There's a word of caution there as well, right? I mean, so while those SOX, compliance, and COVID and all those frameworks, they would define something, and it kind of, I guess it matters from industry to industry how those firms, IT firms or IT shops, organization, how those implement them, because there's a lot of difference between what is supposed to be and what is, because I mean, a lot of time, to your point, those metrics, when you kind of look at them, it's like if you really drill down into it, they're watermelon metrics because COVID tells you follow this, and you should have incident management, problem management, change management, stuff like that, right? And from software development perspective as well, and all those, those controls are there. But once you go start digging in there, and then you started actually measuring the processes and procedures, they're different, right? I mean, it's like it's like apples and oranges, right? I mean, yes. Anybody can define the process as they want to, and they say, oh, we're COVID compliant or we're SOX compliant, but are you really? So those are the really are the ones we should look for. So that's a word of caution there.
I agree, and it's kind of like CMDB. You have to have somebody helping you that knows what they're doing, right? I mean, somebody's got to help. I think of a ship, but somebody's got to navigate. And because I found this stat, and maybe it'll ring true for you, but I think of a boat that leaves the east coast of the US and it's trying to get to London. And for every 1 degree off for every mile, it misses its mark by 92 point something feet, which doesn't sound like much. But now you're going the 1,000+ miles over there, you're going to miss your mark by a lot, and that's only being 1 degree off. And so that's how it is with this. If you do not have people who can help steer the ship, recalibrate, hey, we got to recalibrate and get on track now. So as we go through our last topic, you brought it up a little bit. There's the mix of Agile and DevOps and site reliability engineering, SRE, along with ITIL, and it's kind of a jumbled mess. And so this is just my view, and I don't want to push on you, but I want to get your viewpoint on it. Yeah, sure. The Agile and the DevOps and the SRE are being pushed up an organization into the design, the build, the transition. ITIL in many organizations is being pushed down into an operations mode because we've outsourced that to our external service provider, and we didn't care about it until we have this external service provider. but now that we have an external service provider, oh, we want to keep them in line. You know what I mean? And it's just one of those things. SLAs, I've been to a lot of companies that never cared about SLAs until they had an external service provider. Now we care. And so how do you see all of those? Because some companies have all four of those: Agile, DevOps, SRE, and ITIL in the same company. How do you see them all getting along?
I don't really see them all getting along very well, honestly, because that's a challenge, right? I mean, I think that different executives, in different firms or different, industries, but from IT perspective, they've got a different view, different idea of what works the best, and then basically, that's how we go by. But in actuality, like I was saying earlier, it's kind of an architecture, right? Like, how you develop your system, or from an application perspective, or how you develop your infrastructure from an architectural perspective, and design perspective. It's the same thing as that, right? So when you've got service management office, SMO for that matter, right? And that's how it's supposed to be developed as well, right? So I see, like, if you look at from, managing across life cycle from, ITIL perspective, right? In there, it kind of defines the, agile and SRE and DevOps and everything. And then, but the idea is kind of pushed down to, okay, well, once, so IT leaders are kind of bringing SRE and all those and DevOps and everything, basically saying that, oh, this is basically it, right? I mean, that's all we need. But whereas it's kind of not really, because, if you look at from architecture standpoint, you need everything, like I said earlier, right? I mean, ITIL will tell you, what it is, but they don't tell you how to do it, right? And that's kind of I don't know if it's a drawback or not, but that's something, I think in version 4, they kind of, start going on a different route, right? I think you probably mentioned in your book as well that, it's not as detailed, so it's kind of a, again, going back to the same word, it's kind of an architectural area that, you gotta define in your services. So, Agile and SRE, DevOps is there, but none of those are gonna basically replace ITIL, because, at the end of the day, I think all those frameworks kind of complement ITIL. That's what I'm thinking. It's not that, you just implement SRE or just implement DevOps or just, they all complement each other in a perfect way. And then I see that companies don't really do that. I mean, I think that's something is a weakness, maybe, maybe an opportunity as well for leaders who, are trying to implement, to the best way possible. It's an opportunity as well for them to see that, hey, okay, we need to look at it from architectural standpoint, not just framework standpoint, right?
And what happens, if we're being frank, is that the C-level turns over much more frequently than we really, when we see the numbers, it's like every 3 years or something. And so each time they're like, oh, and I don't want to, I'm paraphrasing and generalizing, I'm not saying about anybody specific, but they're like, they come in, they're like, oh, those previous people are idiots, here's how we're going to do it. And so they institute their way of doing it, and then, by the time it gets up and going, now the next regime comes in, oh, those people are idiots, blah blah blah. And so I still think that Agile is going to be how things are designed and implemented, and DevOps some that way, and transitioned, if you want to use V3 kind of conversation vernacular. But I think, to your point, ITIL still has that role in that operations, because it has the CMDB, what's going to be changed, your incident management, your change management. There's still that role that none of the other frameworks understand or they take on.
No, absolutely. I totally agree with you. Because, I mean, end-to-end service lifecycle or end-to-end service value system is only defined in ITIL and not in SRE. It's not in, DevOps. It's not in, Agile for that matter. The whole end-to-end is defined within ITIL. And then, that's why I was saying earlier that, the other frameworks or methodology for that matter, if you want to call them, they only complement ITIL, right? I mean, that's something, the value only comes from that perspective, right? I mean, you can't, because I think from my standpoint, from my understanding, all those other methodology or framework are only from operational perspective, not from end-to-end service delivery, or service strategy for that matter as well, right? So end-to-end service value is only from ITIL standpoint. So, yep. I
And
agree.
so some of the service management leaders, they feel like they're getting their toes stepped on, to use an American phrase.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, this is getting a little too close. We like the design and we like all this other part that was traditionally service management. How can those leaders help turn the tide and work together with Agile instead of being, I use Agile, it could be DevOps or SRE,
Yeah. Yeah.
versus us against them, that the versus being the tail and seeing the other as the dog, so to speak.
I think that, and like I was saying earlier, right, it's a top-down approach. I honestly think that the top-down approach needs to come into picture here. And I think that, in my experience, a lot of companies, they're missing SMO, right? Service Management Office. I mean, they've got a PMO, right, which is Project Management Office, and they've got other offices, right? And then I don't think that I've seen many of SMOs. Some companies who really understand ITSM, COBIT, and all those frameworks, right? They do understand the value of that they need to have an SMO, right? Sometimes it becomes political. All those areas come under one one roof, which basically manages everything, right? And then so
Right.
it's not a separate entity, so it becomes very political, right? I mean, because if you are providing services from IT perspective and you have SMO or those functions within you, it's basically it's kind of I would say, for lack of a better term, conflict of interest, right?
Yes.
It becomes politics. So I mean political. So yeah, I think that a lot of it could be resolved by having an SMO. Also, if expertise are not in house, bringing somebody like your company, I think would really help benefit, of course, because every field has an expert. And then so we need an expert to have that drive that SMO, right? We cannot be, the other way is to, provide training internally and stuff like that, right? And then making sure, but that of course takes a long time, right? The other day I was, I would like to mention Clubhouse to you because I think we talked about Clubhouse a little bit. I was listening to one of the podcasts within Clubhouse, and then they were talking about leadership, right? And then they were saying that there's two parallel entities that work together. One is a visionary, the other one is an executor. So they both need to work hand in hand, right? And then basically, if they work right, then things go right? So I think that like I said, top-down approach, management, change management, having an understanding of what from ITSM, ITIL, and all those frameworks actually mean from architectural standpoint. I think that's something what is needed, and finally establishing an SMO. And if you don't have expertise in house, hire somebody from outside who can help you. So,
Thank you for the kind words, and I'm right there with you in agreement, because that's why in the book, not to reference it too much, I put the in-house expertise as a potential obstacle, or at least a factor on how quickly you can transition to ITIL 4, because those are your people that are on the front lines communicating value. Those are the people that are helping you take those steps. And if you don't have those people, you need some outside help, because training's not going to get them there fast enough. I don't think. That's just my personal view, because we all understand the what and the how. It's trying to get people to understand the why, and it's like having a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, why? Because some people have to understand it fully before they buy in. And
yeah. And good example of that is like problem management, right? I
yes.
mean, so once you first onboard problem management and newly practice or process, whatever you want to call it, right? A newly problem management practice, at that time you're like totally reactionary, right? I mean, and then some time go by, and then you basically become proactive, from reactive to proactive, right? So most of your force is when they were doing reactive problem management, the long-term goal is to do proactive problem management, right? But if you stay for reactive problem management for the longest time, that's a problem, right? I mean, that's not really a good thing, because it's not meant to be like that. But if you stay reactive mode, and then that's not going to provide value, what problem management is supposed to do. So yeah, I mean, in-house expertise is good. I mean, I think the best thing to do, if somebody doesn't have in-house expertise, bring in somebody as a trainer, embark on the journey, train the trainers, and then afterward, the trainers are going to probably, replicate through other organization, right? So from architecture standpoint.
Yes, and it's how it's built. It's a house. How do we build the house? And
Exactly.
how do we govern the building of the house with SMO and also your governance for your process as well as your CMDB? How do we do this in a thought out way? And your example on problem management, I was helping an organization late last year, and they were all in the reactive mode. And I was trying to help explain the value that once you move to proactive, you'll see much better results, because your results won't be on the problem side, they'll be on the incident side, reducing potential incidents before they pop up. And how do we measure those? How do we look at that as a problem statement and try to address it backwards? And problem management's tough. It's like CMDB, it's tough.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to say nobody should do it. I'm just saying it's not easy. And it's doing root cause and going, so, it's kind of like doing the change post-implementation reviews. Nobody likes saying, so Mr. Smith, why'd your change fail? Nobody likes that. And especially Mr. Smith, because you get yelled at. And so it's one of those that certain I'm on blanket statement, go sideways here a minute, Waseem. But I think service management roles are some of the most difficult ones within an organization, because you don't go to school for them. They're all soft skills, not all, but there's a lot of soft skills, and you need to be able to deal with people, which is unique for IT. And how do you, anyway, that's my tangent, is organizations need to figure out how to keep their people, how to keep training, help keep growing their service management people.
Yep, absolutely. I think that OCM, right, organization change management, is one of the things, right? I mean, when I think when from, I guess, from leadership perspective, IT leadership or executive management perspective, I honestly think that when that office has been established, I think that there is a big need, I would say, for bringing in at the same time and OCM experts, right?
Yes.
Because if we try to do it from internally, might or might not have experts within within in-house that that can change the culture, the things which have been done for years and years and years. It's hard. It's not easy, right? OCM is something you really don't find it internally. You actually, I've seen in my experience that a lot of companies, they hire OCM experts, and then they come in, and then they hold hand and making sure that how they're going to do that. I mean, they know what they're doing. So you need SMEs for that perspective. You can't just have some kind of cultural change just like that out of the blue.
Yeah, they don't see it as a problem. That's the issue, right? That's why you need the organizational change, because the internal people don't see it as a problem, or else it would have been addressed ongoing. Not to stand out too far on a limb there, but that's just one of those things. All right, last question. I appreciate your time, Waseem, and thank you for sharing your expertise with us.
Absolutely.
Service management as a service. It's hard for me to say that quickly. Service management as a service, SMAAS. It's growing. It's becoming popular. People want to have this. So there's these externally outsourced operation to external partners, and then they're like, but we can't trust our partner with our service management org, so we need it as a service.
Right.
How can organizations employ this SMAAS in a way that it helps provide that governance? Because service management does allow governance. It allows a business view of your IT services, things of that nature. How can that be employed?
Again, it will probably start from the top down, right? I mean, it's all about the vision. I would say, going back to what I was mentioning earlier, to from my perspective, service strategy, right? I mean, the service strategy is basically what we're looking for here. Where you're going to have a defined vision, defined mission. What are you trying to do here? And and then I honestly think some portions could be good candidates for service management as a service. Some probably won't be. It all depends, I guess, how the SMO is set up. Being successful in there, I think probably going to have a strong SLAs, right? Very strong SLM, service management, and kind of drive those, underpin all those OLAs, making sure that we were doing internally as well as much as we're working with the vendors and partners for that matter, whoever our service provider would be for that matter. So I think that again, vision, mission, strategy, right, and then very strong SLM.
So one of my thoughts on it is I would not have the company that I'm outsourcing to be my managed service provider for service management. You need some difference there so you have some objectivity. Do you agree with that, or am I being too strong?
No, you're perfectly, and that's what I was saying, that some portion might, some portion won't be able to, right? I mean, you can't really probably do 100% honestly, because I think that's not really, I mean, then probably we're not going to get a value out of that easily, right? I mean, that's something is going to probably, if you do 100%, it's probably going to fail to begin with, right? So, but yeah, some portion you can, some portion you cannot, absolutely cannot. So yeah, I agree with you. You're not being hard. You're right.
So one thought on that, and it occurred to me this week, is that if you do outsource your service management along with your other operations, you're never going to see, you may be compliant, but you'll never see any improvement, any of the continual improvements. The continual improvements will be seen by the service provider. They will incorporate them. You'll never see them because, why should they? Because your service management office and your organization will be able to find improvements, but if you outsource it, those improvements, you're never going to see them. Right,
exactly. And I've seen that as a fail, because I know that some of the companies, they outsource their service desk, for that matter. Huge company. I don't want to mention the name, but there are a couple actually. They outsource their service desk and whole service desk, service desk function out there to actually outsource, offshore for that matter. Years and years back, they have to bring it back in because they did not see that value. It's not happened one time. It happened multiple times with different companies, and it's no surprise, of course, right? You won't see value in that, of course.
And because the partner's the one that's going to be looking for value, and how can they do it better? They're not going to pass it on to you and say, now, Mr. Customer, we found this way to save you 5%. No, they're going to say, Mr. Customer, yes, we can hold our prices steady another year. Well, they're saving 5% on their end.
Right, exactly.
I mean, just everybody does what they're incentivized to do.
Of course. So I mean, and that becomes very political, right? I mean, that's what it's all about, right? I mean, when they get incentivized, it's something. Then it comes into the service value, right? Then that transparency is not there. That service delivery is not there. So yeah, it kind of becomes a challenge then.
Oh yes, and you can't really outsource governance. You can't abdicate your responsibility there. You can pass on the work, but not the responsibility.
Right, exactly, absolutely.
Kind of like security. You can outsource security, but if there's a cyber attack, that partner's not going to end up in the news. You will. And the same with this other, Enron's remembered for SOX.
Oh my God, yeah.
Less people remember Arthur Andersen as the accounting firm that not allowed it, but didn't find it.
Right.
So it's just one of those things. Thank you for joining us, Waseem, and sharing your knowledge with us.
My pleasure, Jeffrey. It was a pleasure to join in this discussion. Really enjoyed it. Always enjoy it. So thank you very much.
And I hope you have a great day. Thank you all for watching and listening.
Thank you.
Bye.